See what I have done here, and it does deserve some explanation. You see, I've mapped this something called as cross origin, but I did not explain it. Okay? So here I'm saying cross origin, and I'm allowing for the local host colon 4200. There's nothing like 4200 now. You can see that, right? Because when you run the application, the default port is 8080. So the RESTful application is opening up the port number 8080 and it is exposing all the APIs. But why do you need this? Okay? Why do you need to open up another socket and then you have to number it? This is because this address will be later used by your front end. In our case, Angular will use it. Okay? So on Thursday, we are going to create an Angular client, right? So Angular will use the port number 4200. And from Angular, I'm going to call these APIs. Okay? So I'm going to create a page, which is basically the products page. And that page is basically going to connect to this 8080 server side and get the answer. So right now, if you remove this tag also, you can see that it perfectly works fine. And we don't need this tag essentially to be able to test the APIs via Postman. Because when you test it via Postman, you can see the URL that you're using is 8080. So there's nothing to do with 4200. The whole reason I had to put this tag in place is because I'm opening up this API that any front end which is running on the port number 4200 can talk to this. Okay? So it's more to enable Angular connections later on. Okay? So that's the tag that I did not explain. Now what has happened is, you see, I took the full-fledged product image from Choppy, which has got the mapping, many-to-many mapping with tags, and one-to-many mapping with a category. Okay? So basically many-to-one and many-to-many. So many products are connected to one category, so I also included the category tag, and I fixed the getters and setters. What I've done is I've just mimicked whatever we have done in the Choppy application. But here, I went ahead and created more methods. The reason is I didn't want to type and waste your time, so that's why I quickly pulled it in. But you can see what we are trying to do is when no IP ID address or product number is given, it usually lists all the product. But if I go and ask for one particular ID, I would like to get only that particular product. So that's why you can see it's taken in as an argument, which is ID. It's passed as a path variable here, and then the repository will go and find only the product that has got the ID. And normally you can simply send the page or the data. In this case, I'm going to create an entity, which is a model class as a response, and I'm saying return the product data. Okay? So if the ID is found, the response is going to take OK status and give back the product data. If it is not found, it is going to build a not found error. So that's why I'm saying it's not found. So you've got to build a page that says it's not found. Same thing with category. I can say /category and put a category ID. If it's found, it is used. Otherwise, it's not given. Very similarly, I can also create a product. Okay? So when I want to create a product, you can see I'm using this post mapping. I'm passing the product as the argument. Okay? And I'm trying to use the repository class to save it. And if it is saved successfully, I'm going to give you 200. So this is something we have to understand. Anytime we try to communicate to the web, they are going to talk to us in terms of status. So there are some codes that we have to understand when you work with web applications. So maybe I'll just list all the status codes and then spell it out once. So that way you have an understanding of how HTTP code works. So you are writing a client. In our case, our client is the Postman. Okay? And this is generating an API request. And this is taken up by the Spring Boot app that we have just created. So this Spring Boot app is what we call it as RESTful app. This is the name we have given for the application. It's supported by the Spring Stack. Okay? So it's basically using the Spring Boot plus all the starters that we have put in. So this is basically how the application looks like. So when the response is coming back, with every response, this is the request. Okay? So the request can be anything. In our case, what we tested earlier is we said /API/products. Okay? And then what came back in the response is a list of products. Okay? And we simply made sure that we are able to see that on the screen. So for every request that comes in, there is going to be a response that goes back, right? It also sends something called as status code. So this is something which is internal to HTTP. Okay? What do you have to understand about the status code? If your number is anything 200 to 299, it basically means that that page is successful. Okay? You are basically connected to the page and the communication is successful. So that's what 200 to 299 means. Okay? What does any number between 100 to 199 mean? It basically means it's a client-side redirection. Okay? The client is basically trying to get the data, but it is not going to use it. It's going to redirect to some other page. That's basically the understanding of 100. If your status code is somewhere between 300 to 399, we call this as server redirection. Or I think we call this as simple HTTP redirection. Okay? And if it is 400 to 499, it's a client-side error. What it means is the address you are giving is wrong. Okay? Or in other words, you are trying to reach a URL and the URL is not present. Okay? Whatever you are trying to reach is not present inside the server. And if the error is somewhere between 500 to 599, it basically means server is down. Okay? If the error is from the server side, it's going to give you a 500 error. If what you are typing in the address bar is wrong, you'll get a 400 series error. If everything is successful, you'll never see it. That's going to be a 200 error. You will see the server redirection. Okay? So 300 to 399 is server redirection, right? Sometimes you click a URL and the website has moved into a different address. So you will see that the Chrome browser will say the address has moved to a different server and you have been redirected to the new server. You would have seen that. Okay? What it is happening is there was an existing server, it was not working well, they put it down and they moved it to a different address. So anybody reaching this server will be given a symbolic link to that particular server. That's what it means by 300. Okay? So this is all web language. It's nothing created by me. The web works like this. Okay? So that's why when you're typing something wrong, you'll always see 404. 404 is a frequent error. And these days with Gulf War, sometimes when you try to reach certain websites, it gives you a 503. Suddenly Singtel was out. We had a 503. So what it means is Singtel's server went down. UOB was down for some time this week or last week. Then you try to reach the UOB website, it gives you a 503. If the server is down, you always get a 500 error. 500 means the fault is the server side. 400 means what you are typing is wrong. The address is non-existent. And 200 is success. You will never see a success code because you will instead see the page. Okay? The page gets successfully loaded, you see the page. 100 is rare. Sometimes your client needs redirection. 100 is rare but happens as well. So these are basically the error codes that we are looking at. So what we mean by this piece of code is we are trying to say that if it is successful, give the status as 201. It's successful. Okay? So create the response, along with it give a success signal. So that's what 201 means. Now then, of course, if you want to update it, I'm going to use the put method. Okay? And in the put method, I got to use the ID for the product and of course give the content in the product body. Now, how do I give data to this request body? This is where your Postman comes in handy. Okay? So let's see if this works well, and then I'll show you how to do the post method. I mean, it's very similar for the rest, but we can try. So let us restart the server and see if there is any programming error. I don't see, but let me check. Yeah, there's an error. So something goes wrong. It says one of my queries is giving me an error. Error in executing DDL. DDL basically means my create table is going wrong somewhere. Categories. So it can't create the table categories. But is it giving me any error? I think I know what it is trying to tell me. It says I have to create the foreign key constraints. Okay? So it's saying just by using your create it won't work. So I have to create the table via scripts. So I got to write data.sql okay? And then a schema.sql like I usually do. Okay? So that way the tables are not created by the framework. Alternatively, what I can do is I can change the startup. I can simply say not update but create. So you can say create drop. Every time drop your old data, create new data. That's okay, right? Or maybe just say create. There are many settings you can have. You can simply say create data. Every time it creates new data. Create drop means the older schema is dropped when the server is down, and then when the server starts, it creates new table. Create only is basically doesn't drop data, it keeps recreating it. The default is usually update. What update means is if there is existing table, don't touch it. Just update your data set. So I think that's what is creating my error. So I'm going to say create. I'm going to ask this to create and drop. Drop the old data, create new data. So this basically means I may have to give some insert queries to test, but let's see if that fixes the problem. So every time you see, you create a new table. There's still an error. Again, it's still giving me an error. Let me see what the error is. S cannot drop. So somehow I don't have the administrative grant to do the DDL. I hope you know what is DDL, DML. Did they teach you? What is DDL and what is DML? I will forget my language. Guys, you have to try DDL, DML. Have you heard of this before? Yeah? Yes, no? Yes, right? So what is DDL? So, data description language, and this is data manipulation language. These are the two. And in simple words, what it means is, when a table is created, right? So it's basically, if you give commands like, for example, create table, then you say grant access. All this is basically creation commands. Primary key, foreign key, all this definition is basically considered as DDL language. What is DML? Your select query is basically the data manipulation language. So if at all you're using DML can also be insert update. You can write insert, you can write update query, you can write delete query. These are all called DML, manipulative language. But once you want to create the schema, anything that touches the schema, if it deals with schema, then it's called as the data description language. Anything that deals with the data is called as the DML language. So when you write SQL commands, half of the commands are considered as DDL, the other half of it is considered as DML. And what my Hibernate is trying to say is it's trying to create the table using a DML command, create table. But my server is a professional server, right? It is not giving user access rights for the program to control it. So it's saying you can only use the tables, you cannot create the schema. So it's telling me you don't have grants enough to do that. So to bypass that, what do I have to do? I have to write DML scripts separately, DDL scripts separately. So that is why you can see in the Choppy also we did that. We create two SQL scripts. One we call it as data.sql. That's basically the DML commands. Create table, insert table, update table, etc. On the schema.sql, I will say create table, primary key constraints, grant access to this table. All of that I will write it inside the schema.sql. So I'm going to separately present both of them to be able to control the framework. So right now, I'm programmatically trying to insert a table, which is create table categories, and the framework is telling me I don't have rights. So I have to sit down and write that to SQL, then you can see it starts working. So that's exactly what I did in H2, but I think I did not prepare enough for MySQL. So tonight I think I will clean it up and then show you. So once you have this running, what you have to do is, you'll have to come here and give a request, post request, and in that you're going to create the key items. You're going to say what is your ID value. So you give a value for the ID too. So the next is name. You got to give a name. So you got to create all the data set here, and then instead of a get request, you're going to say post request. So this data will go in, and then the record will be created. That's exactly what I want to demonstrate from this demo. Because my backend is sort of naughty, I have to fix my backend first, then I can do this demo. So I'll fix the backend and then we will continue this demo. So for now I stop it. Tomorrow morning I'll have the scripts inside, and from there we can continue the rest of the testing. But the idea is you will be able to test all methods. So you can see that you can use your controller method to create the CRUD operations. So if you look at the controller method, the create method is going to be the post mapping. Okay? Update method is going to be the put mapping, as you can see. And to delete a record, you got to say delete mapping. Okay? So we will complete this demo tomorrow morning, and then we'll start the repository classes. But before winding up the day, I have a few more theory pointers about controllers which I'll speak, and then I'll close the class. Okay? So I'm going to stop here.